Hello, my name is Dr. John Abendanza, a member of the Optometric Extension Program Foundation Board of Directors. Welcome to the OEP Archive Podcast. This program was created by OEP to preserve and share important OEP recordings from years past. We hope that you enjoy and learn from these recordings. OEP is the organization that A.M. Skeffington created in 1928 to provide postgraduate continuing education to optometrists. If you would like to learn more about the Optometric Extension Program Foundation, including our journal, Optometry and Visual Performance, the OEP Clinical Curriculum of Courses, the OEP Store, and more, you may visit us at www.oepf.org. Thank you for listening.
Hi, it's Dr. Nate Bonilla-Warford here with another episode of the OEP Archive Podcast. And if you're anything like me, you probably spend a lot of time talking about digital devices and video games and vision when you are talking with your patients throughout the day. It's the type of conversation that no matter what issue you're talking about, always is relevant. And when we're talking about video games and vision, sometimes I think we tend to think of this as a more recent phenomena with the advent of iPads and games that you can download on phones. But I'm here to tell you that this discussion has been going on for a very long time. And today I'm going to bring you a lecture from, I don't know exactly when, I'm assuming the very early 80s, called PAC-MAN, the greatest threat to visual welfare. This was a lecture given by optometrist G.N. Getman, presented to the San Jose Optometric Vision Therapy Conference. And without further ado, let's dive right in.
Latest threat to vision appears to be PAC-MAN, and Dr. Jerry Getman would like to make some remarks on this animal or creature or whatever it is that's invading our lives.
PAC-MAN, the latest threat to visual welfare. Or, if PAC-MAN had been available, Pavlov would have had no need for dogs. Recently, a young man who had just set a world record for high score on PAC-MAN was being interviewed on television. He was asked how he had accomplished this spectacular record and how he had prepared himself for it. His answer is the most classic description of the origin of a visual problem and the layman's expression of the famous Skeffington comment about the biologically unacceptable near-centered visual task. This young man replied, "I have been able to achieve this remarkable score by keeping my eyes completely and constantly focused on the screen, and by being sure that I completely ignore anything and everything that goes on around me." This young man never heard of Skeffington, and his repeated warnings about the stresses of constrained, maintained, near-point visual activities. And of course, this newsworthy champion of the video culture never read Duke Elder's a bit about, quote, the victims of eye strain, which includes those capable people to whom achievement counts too much, who are oversensitive to the dictates of exaggerated, exacting duties, and who keep their minds under the lash and meet fatigue not with rest, but with further applications of the lash. The functional factors of eye strain therefore arise from the interrelations of personality and environment, end quote. If practice and training for the world's highest video game score is an element of achievement and is representative of the dictates of an over-exacting and exaggerated duty, this young man has also set a world's record in a threat to his visual welfare. There are several aspects to all of this that seem worthy of a bit of optometric consideration at a conference such as this. First, I hear of optometrists now recommending video games as suitable instruments for vision training. Recently, a colleague in my neighborhood made the newspaper announcement that he was adding PAC-MAN to his training room instrumentation. And just now recently, both McDonald's and Taco Bell are using video games for bait. Specifics such as eye-hand coordination are being listed as the area of visual benefit. Speed of visual recognition and acuity training are also being named as the expected beneficiaries. We immediately must take a careful look at the visual conditions found in the video game arcade. Not only the demands of the game screen, but the environment in which these games are being played. I'm confident Darrell Boyd Harmon is turning over in his grave every time another arcade is opened. We also need to carefully evaluate what it is we really mean by eye-hand coordination. There is more than a little reason to conclude that the area of the video screen and the brightness levels of this screen are immediately conducive to extreme visual stress. The June envelope from the Optometric Extension Program contained a paper written by Leon F. Miller, then a graduating senior at SCCO, which was chosen as one of the winning papers in the Knight Henry Memorial Awards. If you have not read and reread this paper, it should be at the top of your list of priorities upon your return home. The studies Dr. Miller reports and the evidence he presents on video display units and the drastic influences upon vision in homes and offices must become items of deep concern to every optometrist who will be facing patients with problems never before experienced. When 46 to 75% of video display workers report visual discomforts and visual problems never before experienced, it would seem smart for optometrists to open this discussion with every patient coming into our offices. When there are losses of 2 and 3 lines on acuity charts after 3 hours of continuous VDT operation, what will be the acuity losses at the end of a 40-hour week? I will not take the time to review all of the Miller paper here, but I do insist you must read it at your earliest opportunity. Covered here are some of the splendid suggestions for every optometrist. And if Dr. Miller had had a couple of years of practice in behavioral optometry, I know he would have made some more significant recommendations for all of us. The schools are suddenly entranced by the potential teaching facilities offered by video display units. University professors are being quoted about the dangers of computer illiteracy and video display ignorance. There are now intensive summer courses for teachers on the use and applications of classroom computers. The elementary schools are providing summer courses for students in video display systems. The computer companies are advertising in the daily papers. I'm sure you've all seen them. Keep your child at home this summer. Give him the summer in front of your television set with a new home video computer. This one says, encourage your kids to spend summer in front of a TV set. These video display systems are rapidly becoming the diversive and esoteric answer to the widespread reading problems. The child need not really learn to read. All he needs to do is learn to operate a computer, and it'll do his thinking and spelling for him, as long as there's still a few smart individuals around to program and produce the software that will become available in the supermarket checkout counters. Miller mentions glare, flicker, contrast, color, and the stresses on the ocular saccade system. The one major factor he fails to consider is the elimination of peripheral stability. One of the reasons why the young man became a champion, by completely ignoring everything that goes on around me, he said. The behavioral optometrist has been fully aware of the importance of visual periphery for many years. We have known that the loss of visual periphery is a major contributor to the increase of myopia, and the training and recovery of visual periphery skills is a major contributor to the recovery of all visual abilities. The video display, PAC-MAN as a game, or the unit in office and classroom is sure to demand that the operator learn to suppress his visual periphery. I wish we could return to the opportunities many of us had at Ohio State University in the laboratory of Professor Sam Renshaw. If we could, we would have the opportunity to create a PAC-MAN situation and carefully observe the involved video player with retinoscopes to watch the shifts into myopia that I'm confident would occur. If there was ever an opportunity for a significant study in our optometric colleges, it would be a video display unit in use while retinoscopic observations are being made with and without the proper near-point lenses. If ever there was an opportunity to emphasize the importance of near-point lenses, it's this. And it could bring the optometric profession into its full role as mediating preventive clinical discipline. The factor of eye-hand coordination needs some comment. First, we need to examine just what it is we mean when we use the phrase eye-hand coordination. It is my understanding, after 40 years of exploration in visual development, that eye-hand coordination is the long and involved process by which an individual gains the skills of using these two important output systems, vision and taction, to perform an innumerable tasks of our culture. It is my understanding that this coordination is needed to meet a variety of tasks in a variety of situations. And if the coordination is achieved in one area of activity only, without any transduction and application to other activities, there is really only a splinter skill of little general use. As I watch the hypnotized teenager and the entranced pre-presbyal spending hours in front of these video games, I note that the hand actions are very little more than a conditioned reflex response to a flicker on the screen. And the score achieved is a direct result of how quickly a joystick can be wiggled through a total range of 2 1/4 inches right and left, or 2 1/4 inches forward and backward. This movement is the movement that closely resembles the most primitive action of the fisted hand of the infant. What I'm observing here can well be compared to the actions demanded by the pinball machines of 1 or 2 decades ago, where those experts won extra games but achieved no ability they could utilize in any other activity. Of course, there was a lot of body weave and torque at the pinball machine that probably accounted for some lower backside flexibility. And there's a slight suggestion of this same body weave and twist on Pac-Man. The splinter skill of the pinball machine that achieved a degree of body tilt great enough to urge the steel ball into a bumper without enough pressure to tilt the machine may have been a greater benefit to proprioceptive and vestibular development than we realize. Unfortunately, there is no demand for this same control of subtle body movements on Pac-Man. It is quite evident that the splinter skills of the pinball machine and the splinter skills of the video games do not seem to be the visual tactile dexterities essential to the classroom. The visual decisions present in the video games are very little more than a recognition of a repetitious light pattern on the screen that needs no interpretation, and the hand response is not determined by any significant interpretation of those signals. It is only the response to a presence or absence of a signal that is unique only to the machine chosen by the player. A very recent news story advises that the video games will be of great benefit to girls, since these devices develop hand skills that girls do not usually have the opportunity to achieve. If one looks at the hand skills the female develops in the preschool years, and contrasts these to the hand skills the male fails to develop in the same period of time, one can only conclude this statement has to be the brainchild of the promotion department for the video arcades. It has been noted that the arcades are populated almost entirely by males, and there is the need to catch the females' quarters while the fascination lasts. If the female child has had even the most limited opportunities to explore the basics of doll play, she will have achieved visual tactile abilities the male child has missed. Mattel should turn this story around to extend their army of dolls for boys. Another recent news article does give a bit of hope for these limited eye-hand abilities that might be acquired at Pac-Man. The United States Army is undertaking a study to see if these young champions have gained a unique skill which will allow them to operate the rocket aiming computers when the enemy projectile suddenly becomes a flickering spot on the computer screen. I guess one cannot completely condemn the values of Pac-Man when one stops to think that the recent champion may well be the individual who is seated at the computer when World War III starts, and his skill of eye-hand coordination is so great that he hits the intruder before the intruder hits us. I cannot deny that this would be a contribution we would all appreciate, but I still worry about this young man's contributions to society, if the diplomats can find solutions beyond a computerized army that is expected to assure my well-being in the next 10 to 20 years. In all sincerity, let us really look at this business of eye-hand coordination, which we discussed so glibly. A review of the developmental process of the entire visual tactile complex should remind us there is something more important than wiggling a joystick a couple of inches or pushing a button on a flickering signal. The ultimate purpose of the visual system is the guidance of all aspects of both general and special movements through all ranges of ability inherent in a total structure designed and articulated for movement. Within this total action program is the uniquely specialized ability to make visual discriminations of unlimited details and informational content. If the human can begin to achieve the supreme levels of the visual abilities, which apparently are inherent in the God-given system, this visual system should be served by the tactile system, usually the hand, as the most available output facility. Thus, in the total development, integration and interweaving of these completely relevant systems, the human has the potentials of imaginative and creative productivity that raises him high above all other animals. The flickering patterns of the video games seem to lack a few of the challenges every human should be experiencing in the development of eye-hand coordination. Undoubtedly, the years I've spent exploring and extending the development of the human in visual and tactile behaviors has so prejudiced me that I may very well be blind to the benefits being claimed for video games. Acknowledging my ignorance leads me to several questions you may be able to answer for me. 1. What is the skill coming from video games that will be transferable and applicable to classroom performance or to any conceivable occupational demand? 2. At what level of intellectual interpretations and cognitive decisions is the game player operating as the high score is being sought? 3. What are the immediate hand and eye dexterities evolving from the hours spent in front of these games? 4. How can these machines be used to extend any sort of communication skills with peers, or with parents or teachers, beyond the report of the scores achieved? What can one learn at these machines that can be communicated to others to assist them in their intellectual development? If we in behavioral optometry really believe that vision is a process of integrating all information systems for the total performance of the individual in the life at work, and if we have any real convictions about our conclusions concerning the stresses that negatively influence visual development, we will be taking a very careful look at video displays units and all their variations when we offer the vision care we know to be in the public's best interest. If we thought the printing press brought visual deteriorations and adaptations, we'll take special note of this latest threat to visual well-being of all patients. There's only one conclusion I can reach. Again, optometry has some answers and mediations not available from any other clinical discipline. What are we going to do about it?
Not knowing you were going to do this, somehow, and particularly because of what I have seen in the last week and been sensitive to, I've been in hopes that you, he who gave and put so much time into understanding and giving us insight into development, would do just what you did, and I applaud you for it, and I thank you personally, and I mean that sincerely, and I hope we all do and appreciate this.
Thank you, Bob. Now, this same thing applies to slot machines. You know that.
But I've been concerned, and a number of us have been, and actually, subconsciously, I think we've been dependent upon you, Master, this to pull this together and say it in the way only you can say it. And number one, I have to urge that you and with this in its present form must get this into print in our optometric literature and our public literature as rapidly as possible. Get it in print fast, Jerry, and thank God you're you.
Thank you, Bob. Wednesday evening, our Orange County newspaper, the special section on amusements, comes out with a full page, The Video Craze, and the opening comment, games useful to children, says Professor Mitchell W. Robin, Professor of Psychology and Data Processing at New York City Technical College, says video games are not harmful to children. They increase the child's skills, competency, and self-awareness, and they should be encouraged rather than deplored. Why do you believe, the first question, why do you believe video games are valuable to children? His answer, video games tend to increase eye-hand coordination and improve reflexes. So, you know, it's pretty bad. Larry.
Jerry, you know, it's going to be a real revolution to come out and say that it's not, because the kids love it, the parents have babysitters, and now to go and really put out some of these facts, I have a feeling that the reception will not be as great as we'd like it to be.
My reception has never been very great.
I think there are a couple other things that you have to look at. One is the work of John Ott and all his work with mostly television, which is the same type of thing, and abnormal growth and that sort of thing that comes out of the radiation from the screen. I just noticed, I believe it was in the Chronicle about 3 weeks ago, the Canadian Nursing Association has asked for a moratorium to be put on the VDTs because they've noticed a lot of miscarriages and birth abnormalities of people that work in front of these screens.
Dr. Marga is involved in some of this, and one of these days, very soon, he'll probably be putting out information far better than mine on just some of the factors that are significantly alarming. If anybody has access to ASHA, not American Speech and Hearing, but what is that?
Yeah. Institute of Occupational Safety and Health.
Yeah, that one. OSHA. Well, I was close. OSHA. OSHA. Their literature is amazingly alarming on what these things are doing to people. And so I don't know. But the thing that upset me more than anything else, and the reason I got fired up on this, was when my colleagues start advertising the benefits to the visual system, then I blew my stack. Because it's just not acceptable in my model. And anytime my model gets disturbed, I blow my stack.
Let me then add. Yes, he did. He gave me permission. Another example of what I called attention to yesterday. Dr. Getz mimicked me this morning and recalled attention to it in a very positive manner. This notion that the bottom line is that in final analysis, there's damn few facts in this world. We are guided by our concepts, theories, and notions. And we're guided by what we believe in relationship to this. And here's a beautiful example of it right here. Because if you are of a point of view other than that which we have insight into and are guided by our concept of behavioral notions, the behavioral concept, which incorporates the insight and understanding of vision development and related to child development and so forth down the line. If you are of any other point of view, I can well see, as an optometrist with a point of view other than the behavioral, how you could fall into the trap of being very positive and encouraging of these devices. But anyone, I challenge anyone with the insight of the behavioral concept to have anything other than a negative view towards these type of devices. And I do firmly believe that if nothing else, if this material goes no further than this room today, which I hope is totally untrue, that if nothing else, each of us with the behavioral concept will at least be able to discuss this and deal with it intelligently with each and every one of our patients, be it a child or a parent of a child or any other adult, because there's no adult in the world that has no contact with other people, be they child or otherwise. And I think we owe it to our public within our practice.
The basic statement that you made about the interview with the guy about why he was so good with PAC-MAN was that he shut out periphery. There's probably not a game in this world which requires better peripheral information processing than PAC-MAN.
On how big a screen?
Huh?
On how big a space?
On a space, depending on how far you are away from the...
How big a space? Come on, how big is the screen?
You let me finish.
I'm asking you a question. I'm asking you a question.
It depends on where you play the game. The screen might be 21 inches. The screen might be 40 inches, and your angle is going to be dependent on how far you are away.
See, I was asking for information because I've only seen small screens.
But you have to be able to process what is going on peripherally. You have to be able to process the position of all the enemies. You have to be able to predict where those enemies are going to be and when they're going to be there, so that you can avoid, being in conflict with them, or if you're chasing them, or whatever's going on in the game. You have to be able to do those kinds of things. It builds in skills that you are deprecating, like visual reaction time, like peripheral awareness. It builds in the kinds of skills, aversions and saccadics, things of that nature, which are directly applicable to an athletic field. one of your questions is what skills, does it have any value for them? The better athletes tend to be the ones who are better at those particular things, even though it is a two-dimensional game and they have to play in a three-dimensional world. If we can build those kinds of games in a three-dimensional form, I mean, for those of us involved with sports vision, it would be a tremendous training device. Just as this is a tremendous training device. It does things that athletes need. In using it in the therapy room, it is a high motivational kind of a device, especially in using it with anaglyphs and things of that nature. The kids want to play it, and it does them a heck of a lot of good, and I don't think we should totally deprecate the value of these things in spite of what they're saying.
I would like to make a comment on both of the arguments. I think you're both right and both wrong. I think there's a mediator. I think that there, again, number one is possibly some of the value that Don mentions, and on the other hand, I think there's very definitely some of the concerns that you mentioned that we all have had. However, I feel they probably are here to stay, and to come out with a public statement of how terrible these are and so forth is probably not going to have Atari immediately withdraw all of their instruments from the market. I think if we can come out and maybe get the kids, the parents, to limit the kids to 15 minutes a day, I'm sure their visual systems will survive the onslaught for 15 minutes. The games will still be around, the kids will be happy, and we will not be seeing the tremendous visual problems resulting from them. So that maybe in terms of our public awareness or our public opinion, that a limited amount of time at these games on a daily basis is a nice compromise.
See, I'm not the least bit worried about the public. I'm worried about you and me. I'm worried about our attitudes. And in that sense, in that area, I've got to ask, just what do we mean by visual periphery? The survival periphery is a whole lot wider than this, whatever big screen you've got. And that's the periphery that counts when we become a performing human being. It is not even a 40-inch screen. It's out here at wide angles, and that's where the athlete operates best. He doesn't operate within a central area. Plus the fact, and I will, if I can get some way to set up a PAC-MAN institution with situation with the right kind of a chance to observe with a retinoscope and a few things like that, I will bet up to whatever amount anybody wants to pick up, that under those circumstances, whatever the size of the screen is becomes a central performance. It is not what we call a peripheral performance. And so I don't think we can talk that way. Don, it all depends on what you think periphery amounts to.
I think that's our difference. Because
yes.
A good performer in Pac-Man is a very loose, relaxed performer.
Centrally.
The bad performer zeroes in centrally, and he's not aware of anything else that's going on.
It all depends on what you call central and peripheral. So there's our argument.
I think we can again go back to that you're either going to be for, against, or neutral, depending upon your point of view and the concept. Nor do I think that it's necessary for us officially to ever come out being against anything.
That's not the point.
Just as Jerry is pleading for, as an individual optometrist, where does it fit within your scheme? If it doesn't match, if it is obviously a depriving device as related to deprivation, a restraining factor that can induce additional adverse adaptation, interfere and restrict, we have a right and a need and a demand to imply to our people that we're confronted with.
I'll be there in a minute, Larry.
How do we explain our patients who, after going through visual training, improve on the video games?
Oh, well, that's no problem with me. Anytime you get any improved range of visual performance, it ought to apply on anything they do. And I would hope it would apply even on Pac-Man, as it will apply in all their other tasks and visual operations. No, I have no trouble with that one, Bill, at all. In fact, that's the horse I'd like to ride. All right, three more questions. All right.
As far as my experience has been, what I know about the computer game industry, the computer industry in general, they're really interested in improving the health of individuals. They give grants to educators and so forth. They're into it for themselves. But what my comment is how would you change computer games in order to make them more beneficial?
I don't know that I can. I don't know that. All I know is that I'm confident of. And I only know it out of all the years I've been looking at this visual development process. And all the opportunities we had to work under Renshaw at Ohio State, and all of Harmon's work, all of the support we get on what this visual system is and how it best operates. And anytime we put anybody into that kind of a restricted area, something has to change that's not really beneficial. That's all I know. Larry?
I was thinking, Jerry, I'd be willing, if you would be, to form a committee to do some research with a grant from Atari. I mean, coming from someone like yourself, associated with your experience and so forth, a committee and having them involved.
I'd love to.
Which I think would be the best thing to do.
I've got several preconceived ideas that I think really have to be chased seriously. I know, but I want preconceived questions. Let me say it that way. That apply. One more. Art.
I think the main point here is there may be things about PAC-MAN that are good, and there may be things about PAC-MAN that are bad. It's a two-dimensional screen. You don't have a normal periphery. You can bring it in, and it's like a video screen. I mean, I'm sure if you're going to sit before this thing, say an hour, not 5 minutes and changing to something else, but just sitting there for an hour. This allows time for adaptation to meet the needs of this task, and I think it's bad.
When I first heard this lecture on tape, I thought it was fascinating how quickly Dr. Getman got to the heart of the matter with movement and central peripheral vision. Now, unless you think that this is the entire story, for the next episode, I am going to have a follow-up lecture called In Defense of PAC-MAN, A Rebuttal. And that is by Dr. Don Getz, presented at the Southern California Vision Forum not too long after this. So you can hear some more discussion about PAC-MAN and vision. In the meantime, thank you to OEP for allowing me to present this information. If you have any questions, you can reach me at doc@brighteyestampa.com. Stay tuned in 2 weeks for the next episode.